The 2024 NFL season is coming to a close, and some teams can't wait for the season to end, while other teams' seasons are just getting started. There's been countless things that have happened over the first few months of the year, like Devontae Adams being reunited with Aaron Rodgers, or like Bryce Young being benched only to come back and look a lot better, or like the NFC North having 3 teams with double-digit wins by the middle of December. It's been an eventful season so far, and in today's video, we are going to break down what we learned from the 2024 NFL season. This is going to be relative to preseason expectations from what we thought back in August to where franchises are currently. We will also discuss the long-term impact and how teams will try and implement what some of the more successful franchises did in 2024. I don't think anybody would have thought the Bengals would have the offensive success they did while having a losing record, and I don't think anybody would have thought there would be a generational competition for the number 1 overall pick with only a few games left in the 2024 season. But there is a lot to dive into and break down in today's video, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video with how much coaching matters. Every player has expectations entering the season, as the expectations for a prime Josh Allen are not the same for a rookie Caleb Williams, nor should they be, but for what the expectations were entering Caleb Williams' rookie season, I think he's failed to live up to those lofty expectations. Now, on the other side of the coin, you don't have to look very far to see someone who has passed every expectation entering the 2024 season, and that's fellow NFC North quarterback Sam Darnold. It's been a really tough year for Caleb and the Bears, especially for how high expectations were entering the season, and I don't think it's fair to solely blame coaching for the reason the Bears have struggled as much as they have, but it certainly plays a big part. We often talk about the NFL being cyclical, and I even made a video on a change that I think will be coming in the near future with quarterbacks about a month ago, but Caleb Williams being as highly touted as a prospect as he was, and struggling as much as he has, is an example as to why quarterbacks need time to develop in today's NFL, and I think the same also applies to somebody like Anthony Richardson, who we will discuss later in the video. Sam Darnold, on the other hand, was by every definition a draft disappointment heading into the 2024 season. From 2018 through 2023, he had a career record of just 21-35 and had just 63 career passing touchdowns to 56 interceptions across 6 seasons. He was joining his 4th team in 7 years, and I'll be honest, heading into the 2024 season, I was actually more excited for around the week 7 or 8 area, presumably when it would be clear to everyone that Sam Darnold was not the answer, and I was eager for the JJ McCarthy era to begin. Now, unfortunately, JJ had season-ending knee surgery in the preseason, but the part of Sam Darnold being consistently bad never happened, and it's due in large part to both coaching and his supporting cast. There's obviously been low moments like the Jets game in which Sam missed several throws, or the Jags game in which Sam threw 3 brutal interceptions, but he has 29 touchdowns to 11 interceptions on the season, and is in the top 10 voting for the Most Valuable Player award. I would have never believed that in a million years heading into the season, that the Bears would be 4-10 and that the Vikings would be 12-2 with a legitimate chance to get the number 1 seed. The Bears also fired their offensive coordinator and head coach, and there's a lot of concern within the Windy City on whether or not they've already ruined Caleb Williams. I think he will be fine in the long run, but it's been an incredibly long season in Chicago for a variety of reasons, and coaching is certainly one of them, or lack of developing their number 1 overall pick. It also doesn't help he's been sacked over 55 times, some due to himself of course, but also some due to the offensive line. Now, I really didn't like the situation Bo Nix was entering in his rookie year, especially after the Broncos decided to release veteran Tim Patrick. I thought there was a chance he could put up decent numbers, but I didn't think Bo Nix would be great in his rookie year. He of course started the year with back-to-back 2 interception games, and it didn't look good. But over the next 10 games, Bo threw 16 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, and the Broncos looked like a different team. Unfortunately, Nix has thrown 5 interceptions in his last 2 games, but I do think that will gradually go down and he will be fine. Sean Payton has played a tremendous part in Bo's developing as the season progressed, and the Broncos have secured a winning season and will probably go to the playoffs, all with the 6th quarterback taken in the 2024 draft. And the big thing to remember heading into 2025 is to never underestimate the power of a good coaching staff. Next up is running backs matter a lot more than previously thought. The NFL is cyclical, and for a couple of years span, running backs were not prioritized in the draft probably as much as they should have. There is a caveat with this, and we'll get to that in a minute, but the Philadelphia Eagles are a 12-2 team, and it's due in large part to their run game. Now, the Eagles are one of the most complete teams in the NFL, but I personally think there is a big difference between the 2022 Eagles, a team that nearly won the Super Bowl, and the 2024 Eagles, and it's due in large part to Saquon Barkley. Saquon has nearly 1,700 rushing yards on the year, and nobody would bat an eye if he ran for 2,000 this year, and the difference between the Birds having DeAndre Swift in 2023, or even Miles Sanders in 2022, and Saquon Barkley in 2024 is noticeable, and it's because running backs matter a lot more than the media discusses. Within reason, of course. Derrick Henry is another good example, and my point isn't that two good running backs in Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry are very good at what they do. My point is, a good running back can help take a team over the top if put in the correct situation. For as good of a year as Saquon Barkley is having, I will be honest, if he was still a Giant in 2024, I really don't think their record would be all that different. And while the Eagles were already a good team entering 2024, there is a very real chance Saquon Barkley is the piece that pushes them over the top to give them their second Super Bowl in a span of 8 years. A little spoiler, we will be doing an entire video on the Eagles soon, but this concept also applies to Derrick Henry of the Ravens and Josh Jacobs of the Packers. If you think of a team's offensive line as a nice big steak, think of the running back as the side of garlic mashed potatoes. The garlic mashed potatoes are good, but you're not going to make a meal strictly off the mashed potatoes and compare it to other world-class meals, meaning other dominant NFL teams that are competing for a Super Bowl. But if you have an offensive line like the Eagles do, or you have a quarterback who can change the game on any given play like the Ravens do, and can perfectly complement him with a Hall of Fame back, or if you have a good offensive line and play caller Matt LaFleur like the Packers do, while also having a good quarterback in Jordan Love, the difference in adding a great running back is a substantial difference maker. This is also why I think the Panthers were fine with extending Chuba Hubbard despite drafting Jonathan Brooks in the second round. Now, the unfortunate part is Brooks tearing his ACL a second time, but the plan seemed to be to use both Hubbard and Brooks behind their big offensive line. I have been wrong about countless things before and will be wrong about plenty of things in the future, but I personally loved when the Lions selected Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round because of what that pick meant for Detroit. They could use both David Montgomery and Gibbs together, and they have, and in year one they went to the NFC Championship game, and they're off to a 12-2 start in Gibbs' second season. Now, unfortunately, the Lions had countless injuries, including David Montgomery, and that will be an extremely tough hill to climb, but the point is, running backs matter. A lot. They're not a position you can toss anybody out there and hope for the best and completely discard the position the way the media once made it out to be. I think we are in the middle of a big NFL transition, and teams are going to start prioritizing NFL backs again because more often than not, they know they need two solid backs to get them through the regular season, especially now that it's 17 games and will probably soon be 18 games. Guys like Saquon and Derrick Henry are outliers, but there's a reason the Lions have been successful, and there's also a reason I think the Cardinals will be successful in 2025, and the Seahawks for that matter too, and it's due to their prioritization of the running back position and getting big in the trenches, and as simple as it sounds, running the damn ball. One of the biggest things that I learned from the 2024 NFL season is to limit expectations entering the 2025 season. There were a couple of players and teams I was particularly high on entering the 2024 season, and one was Anthony Richardson, the Colts, and we'll get to that in a minute. But two other players and teams that I thought would perform a lot better than they are Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans, and Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears. Now, the hype for Caleb and the Bears entering the 2024 season was incredibly high, and rightfully so. It was not wrong to say, and this is even with the benefit of hindsight, it was not wrong to say that entering the 2024 season, no number one overall pick had the situation Caleb Williams had entering his rookie year, specifically from an offensive weapons perspective. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift, and you get the point. I did not think that Caleb Williams would be sacked over 55 times in the first 14 games of his career, and I certainly didn't think that he would have a 4-10 record. Now, it's been a completely disastrous season for the Chicago Bears as they went from 4-2, almost 5-2 with a win over Washington, only to lose on a Hail Mary to a very real possibility of them ending the season with a 4-13 record. And it has been a very disappointing for the season for the Bears, but one of the biggest things I learned was to have realistic expectations. And at the end of the day, Caleb Williams is a rookie quarterback. Obviously, he hasn't been perfect. Obviously, the situation around him has been far from perfect, but the same also applies to Will Levis and the Titans. I thought the Titans in 2023 were a pretty bad team, not just by record, of course, but by the talent they had on their roster. There's times where bad record teams, I think, have a lot more talent than their record would suggest, and I actually think the 2024 Jags are a good example of that. I don't think their record is as bad as they are from a sheer talent perspective, but the Titans in 2023 were a bad football team. I mean, Will Levis was throwing to guys like Nick Westbrook-Akine, Treylon Burks, Chigakonkwo, and the receiving game was terrible for not just Will Levis, but for anybody. The offensive line was atrocious as well, and I thought by bringing in guys like J.C. Latham and Lloyd Cushenberry in free agency, and of course Brian Callahan and ultimately his old man Bill Callahan to improve the offensive line, that we would see a much more improved Will Levis in 2024. And there's been flashes of that at times, but the overwhelming play of Levis has been underwhelming, and for every flash that he has, there's usually a pretty bad play to overcome it, and most recently the interception or the pick six against the Bengals was atrocious. I mean, the throw was late, the read was wrong, and that throw should have never been made. And that's one thing that I learned from the 2024 season, is to have realistic expectations entering the 2025 season. I really didn't think it was out of the question for Will Levis to have a 24 or 25 passing touchdown season, maybe have 8 or 9 interceptions, maybe 10 or 11 if a couple balls got tipped, whatever the case may be, and for the Titans to finish with an 8-9, maybe even 9-8 record in the 2024 season. And to be honest, I released the 2024 Titans team preview with the title of "The Tennessee Titans are a team nobody wants to play," and the main reason that I had the video titled as that is because they brought in guys like L'Jarius Sneed in free agency as well, or technically through a trade and then signed him to a contract extension, but they brought in good players for the 2024 season, and I thought the defense would be stout, which they were, and for a while they were the number one defensive scoring points allowed team in all of football, and I thought there was a chance that they could finish, like I said, with a 9-8 record, and that they would be a very hard-fought, gritty team, and especially with the interior defensive line duo of Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat, and that nobody would want to get big with this team because the Tennessee Titans would ground and pound on the offensive side of the ball with the additions they brought in on offense, have a good young quarterback, and then be able to punch you in the mouth defensively. Now, I do think the Tennessee Titans underperformed in 2024, which I do think is an understatement, but again, that is one thing I learned from the 2024 season, is to have realistic expectations. Now, I don't want to get into the belief of, well, the Bills are good, the Chiefs are good, the Ravens are good, the Steelers are good, so we'll just pick those teams to do good in 2025, and we're never going to stick our neck out for a prediction again. That is certainly not going to be the case, but I think in terms of projections for where I was entering the 2024 season, especially with Anthony Richardson and the Colts, we are going to reel it in a little bit. I really didn't think it was unreasonable for Anthony Richardson to improve from year 1 to year 2, especially with how much time he had off, and I know he had a season-ending injury early in the 2023 season, but I thought with an improvement over the offseason, and with all of that time to tweak the mechanics, and all of that time for Anthony Richardson to develop chemistry with guys like Michael Pittman, Adonai Mitchell, Alec Pierce, and of course Josh Downs, I didn't think it was unreasonable for the Colts to win 10 or 11 games, especially in that division, and that they would be a force to be reckoned with. Unfortunately, it didn't work out like that, and Anthony Richardson right now has 7 passing touchdowns to 11 interceptions, and I will say entering the 2025 season that I'm not going to fully quit on the Anthony Richardson hype train. I'm just not going to go as far as I did this past season, but the reason that I'm not going to quit the Anthony Richardson hype train is, even if you are an Anthony Richardson doubter or hater, which I completely understand at this point as he has been underwhelming as the number 4 overall pick in the 2023 draft, it is not unreasonable to say that some of the highs from Anthony Richardson are amongst the highest in NFL history from a play-to-play basis. Some of the plays Anthony Richardson makes, it's not an exaggeration to say that maybe 1 or 2 quarterbacks in the history of the NFL can make. Whether it's Josh Allen, whether it's Patrick Mahomes, whoever, there are not many players in the history of the league to make some of the throws that Anthony Richardson makes. It's just completely frustrating to see Anthony Richardson make a throw like he did back in the opener against the Texans, or for him to run for a big play or for him to make another wild throw, and then for him to miss a 10-yard out and for the ball to end up in the fourth row of the stands. So that is one thing entering the 2025 season. If there are any questions in that regard, like there were with Anthony Richardson entering the 2024 season, and there clearly were, I just ignored them and thought that, hey, he'll overcome it. He has Shane Steichen as his head coach. Everything will work out. Now, it didn't help that Michael Pittman underperformed a lot this year and that there were a lot of underperforming players with the 2024 Colts, but that is one thing that I definitely learned from the 2024 season, is to have realistic expectations with young teams and with young quarterbacks entering the 2025 season. But for every Anthony Richardson, Caleb Williams, Will Levis, and you can even include the first half of the season for Bryce Young, there's always going to be teams and players like Jaden Daniels in the Commanders, and I would also throw in Bo Nix in the Broncos, more so Jaden in the Commanders, but you get the point. There's always going to be teams that overachieve by every definition, and good for Jaden in the Commanders, by the way. But I'm not going to stick my neck out the way that I did for Anthony Richardson and say that there's a chance that he's in the top 10 of the MVP voting by the end of the season, because I didn't think it was unrealistic for AR to have maybe 24 or 25 passing touchdowns at this point, and to maybe have 400 or 500 rushing yards and an additional 7 or 8 rushing touchdowns. But here we are. He has more interceptions than passing touchdowns, and it's been a very, very long year for the Indianapolis Colts. So that is definitely one of the biggest things I learned from the 2024 season, and it's to have realistic expectations with young quarterbacks and to really, really look at the situation for each and every player entering the 2025 season. One big thing you will hear me emphasize during the 2025 pre-draft process, and why I will select offensive linemen before they probably should go off the board, is because trenches matter, and in a big way. It's not a coincidence the Eagles have been one of the most successful teams over the past 7 or 8 years, excluding one 2020 season, but there's a reason they've been continuously successful, and it's because Howie Roseman knows how much trenches matter, and that is a huge, huge part of the game, and I think you're going to see that over the course of the 2024 postseason. I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's a game where Jalen Hurts throws the ball less than 15 or 16 times, simply because they are going to let Saquon cook, and they are going to basically say, we know we have a good ground game, try and stop us. And there's also a reason that Detroit has been successful over the past couple of years, and why they will continue to be successful over the next couple of years. And I know it's been a tough year for Detroit, of course, due to injury, and not just the injury bug, but really the injury animal hitting the entire team, but they will be back in 2025, and I think they will be one of the best teams in the NFL again. And I would also say that applies to the Green Bay Packers too, for that matter. Games are won and lost in the trenches, and I think you see that a lot with the Philadelphia Eagles, and there's a reason that offensive linemen go so high in drafts, and why there's a reason that most offensive linemen don't leave their teams, whether it's due to free agency or trade. Teams know how rare it is to have a good offensive and defensive line, and there's a reason they are hard to come by. One other big thing that I think needs to be remembered from the 2024 season is that no matter how star-powered your team is, you have to have either a good foundation defensively or a good foundation along either side of the trenches, and I think the Cincinnati Bengals found that out in a big way this year. In nearly every other season, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase would probably be on their way to a deep postseason run, but I don't think they're going to get there this year, and it's due in large part to the defense. And that's going to be a big emphasis again throughout the 2025 offseason, is if there is a hole anywhere, whether it's corner, whether it's defensive line, we are going to try to plug that hole with a player in the draft, because you can never have a good enough defense in today's era, especially with the 17-game regular season, and especially with how high-powered offenses are in today's era. So that's all I have for today's video. Please let me know what you learned from the 2024 NFL season down below, and like and subscribe if you did, as we are closing in on 175,000 subscribers. And until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.